Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Dana Tribiana and I cover infamous gangsters every week on my show Mob Times, which typically comes out on Tuesdays. If you like mafia history, notorious old-time gangsters, or any kind of true crime content, you've come to the right place because that's what we do here. Okay, so we are now on the second and final part of this week's gangster, Kazuo Taoka. I'm not going to do a full review of the episode that I did last week. If you want to go catch up on that video, I'll leave a link in the description. I'll put part 1 into everything that I have. The YouTube channel is going to have the link for last week's episode. All my podcasts should have the link in the description. So if you want to catch up, go check out part 1 of this video. So I'll just do a very, very brief recap. But we are kind of picking up in the middle of a story. Like, I ended last week's episode halfway through a story. So I'm just going to review very briefly the beginning of the episode, and then we'll go into the rest of today's episode. So we know that Kazuo Taoka grew up as an orphan. His dad died before he was born, and his mom died when he was very young, so he and his siblings were sent to live with their aunt and uncle. His aunt was a neglectful, icky person. She just didn't really care about them, and his uncle was even worse. He was an alcoholic with a lot of anger issues, and he would just beat whoever he got his hands on first, and a lot of times that was Kazuo. So this boy literally never knew the love of a parent a day in his life. Like, he never had any kind of parental love. Later on in life, he would become the protege of Noboru Yamaguchi after he became friends with Noboru's brother and Haruyuki Yamaguchi's son, Hideo Yamaguchi. He ended up meeting Noboru Yamaguchi and would become his protege. After graduating high school, Kazuo would go on to work at a shipyard, but he ended up getting fired pretty quickly because he settled things the way that he knew how. He got into a fight with the foreman on the job, and he settled it the way that he was always taught that beef was settled, through violence. When he lost that job, he went to Noboru, and Noboru said, okay, I'll have you start doing odd jobs here and there for us. So he started doing odd jobs here and there for the Yamaguchi Gumi family. Since he's Noboru's protege, it was very easy for him to just kind of slide into that, and he started learning the ropes of the Yakuza overall. And keep in mind, Noboru is now the leader of the Yamaguchi Gumi family, so it was very easy for him to take him on and put him into some kind of role in the Yamaguchi Gumi family. Things went bad pretty quickly there as well. He was working security one night for a movie theater, and he got into a heated argument with either the owner or the manager, whoever was running the movie theater. He got into a heated argument with that person, and Kazuo threw a hissy fit. He made a big scene outside of the movie theater, and then he moved his little temper tantrum inside the movie theater and got up on the stage in front of an entire audience of people that are there watching this movie and throws another hissy fit in front of this audience of people. Now, this is the kind of thing that gangsters in the Yakuza, they'll typically get beaten or they'll lose a finger for this thing. Like, this is not good. This is a really bad situation. But Noboru knew the way that Kazuo grew up, and he had a soft spot in him, so he decided to show Kazuo kindness. He didn't beat him, he didn't make him give him a finger, but he also decided that he was going to instill some discipline in him. So he ended up sending him to a monastery type of school. Now, normally, like on a normal basis for any other gangster in the Yamaguchi Gumi family, this hissy fit that Taoka threw would be a huge no-no for any member. But again, this is Noboru Yamaguchi's protege. Noboru understands that this boy has been to hell and back, and he's never known kindness, he's never known love, he's never known companionship, and he's never known any kind of empathy. Noboru has a serious soft spot for Kazuo, so he doesn't beat him, he doesn't kill him, he doesn't take a finger, but he also doesn't just let this slide. He knows that Taoka acts out because he lacks discipline. He never had anybody to care about him enough to teach him right from wrong or how to handle himself in any kind of situation that upsets him. Kazuo lived a really hard life, and it shows in his everyday interaction with other people. So Noboru decides he's going to help him to gain some discipline. He's going to help him to take control of the anger that he feels all the time, that he has simmering below the surface, constantly on the brink of explosion, so he sends him off to this monastery. It just so happens that Noboru has a person that he had mentored in the past that had opened a school that instilled some sort of discipline. Think like samurai fighting, business acumen, the works. Everything a strong young man may need to get his anger under control and redirect the emotions that he feels into a more useful, helpful manner that can help him succeed rather than work against his success. And Noboru would have been 100% justified if he decided to dole out any kind of punishment for all of this. This little hissy fit that Kazuo threw, it had a serious interference with their business. And one thing you do not do with the Yakuza is mess with their business. On top of assaulting a business owner that was paying the Yamaguchi Gumi for their security services, he interfered with that business's business as well. That's going to take a serious toll on the relationship between the gang and the movie theater, and that can't just be brushed off. This monastery thing that he got sent to, I'm not 100% sure on the details, but you ever watch a movie and they get sent off to a school and they learn how to sword fight and they learn how to do karate, like you learn all kinds of discipline things? That's what I'm picturing here. Just like a vacation that instills a sense of discipline and teaches you how to be a better person. And going away to this monastery seemed to help. But honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like there was really nothing that could be done to tame this wild beast that was Kazuo Taoka. Taoka had an inclination for violence, and there was nothing that could be done to satiate that inclination other than blood. Like, he knew violence. He didn't know how to sort out issues without using violence because violence was all he ever knew. So let's move on from that little area of time. We're going to fast forward to 1936. Two big things happened for Kazuo Taoka in 1936. First, he swore a blood oath, and he drank sake, and this is pretty much Japan and the Yakuza's equivalent for being made in the mafia. The second thing that happened in 1936 for Kazuo Taoka was that he was arrested for murder, and he would be found guilty, and he would be in jail for the beginning and probably the first half of the actual war that would come to be known as World War II. So before we move on, let's stop for a minute and talk about the initiation ceremony that a gangster would go through to become an official member of the Yakuza. We all know the ceremony in the Mafia. You prick your finger, you hold a picture of a saint, it burns, you swear that you will have loyalty to the Mafia above everything else, your family, your friends, everything else. And, they give you a hug, a kiss on the cheek, and you are now a made man. With the Yakuza, it's very similar, but a little different. Getting into the Yakuza, you don't prick your skin, you don't offer up any blood, but it is symbolized. In the Yakuza initiation ceremony, the blood, where in the Mafia you prick your finger, you give blood, the blood is symbolized in the Yakuza by sake, which is rice wine. I'm sure if you've ever been to a Japanese restaurant, you've tasted sake. In this initiation ceremony, the oyabun and the initiate sit face to face, and they kind of like stare each other down as the sake is being prepared by a guarantor, an azucarinin. And again, I'm so sorry, I know I said that wrong. In the ceremony, the sake is mixed with salt and fish scales. And then it's poured into a cup, and each person is given a cup of sake. The oyabun's cup is filled to the brim, like about to spill over. And that's pretty much giving a nod to all of his experience and all of the respect that he's deserved. He's given more sake because he deserves it. He earned it. And the initiate gets some, but less sake than the oyabun. The oyabun and the initiate, they both drink from their cups, and then they exchange cups. And then they each drink from each other's cup. And that's pretty much it. That's the initiation ceremony. That gangster is now known as a Kobun, and his commitment to the family, the Yakuza, the entire gang as a whole, is now made. The new member of the Yakuza usually wraps up the sake cup and he keeps it as a symbol of this gigantic undertaking that he just underwent. This is a huge commitment. So let's get into a little bit how Taoka was arrested for murder. Because honestly, this crime is all but erased from the world. I only found one place where who he killed was mentioned, and I have no idea if it's even true because it's ungoogleable. I can't verify it. I can't find it in more than one location. And again, the facts about this case are virtually non-existent to English speakers. The only thing that I could find about this case and this guy at all was a movie that was written in 1973 called Japan's Top Gangster. It's in Japanese, so obviously I can't watch it, but one of the main characters in this movie is called Taoka Isao, which I would assume is Kazuo Taoka. Another main character in this movie is called Nobuto Yamaguchi, so I would assume that this is Noboru Yamaguchi. I feel like if I was able to watch this movie, I would get all kinds of amazing information, but it's just impossible. And to be 100% honest, like when I wrote that out, I was like, whatever, like I'll just go find the movie, I'll watch it, and I'll get rid of that part where I put that. But let me tell you how freaking hard it is to find a movie that came out in the 70s in Japan. I found places that I could buy the DVD, but it's for $500. I love you guys to death, and I do the best research that I possibly can. But I'm not paying $500 for a DVD so that I could read subtitles on a movie that was rated 29 out of 100 on IMDb. Like, I love you guys to death, but I'm just not doing it. So we're going with what we can find outside of the movie, and at this point, I'm just kind of telling you guys like, hey, this is for entertainment purposes only, because I can't verify any of this information. Overall, on Kazuo Taoka in general, I found 3 movies that seem like they would fit. The first one is called the Yamaguchi Gumi Sandame. The second one is called Sandame Shumi. And the third one is called Japan's Top Gangster. And out of these 3 movies, not one of them are you able to stream. You're not able to watch them online. I even was going to pay for it if I could watch it online. You can't buy a DVD that's less than $100. One of those DVDs is available for like $150, but it doesn't have English subtitles. It's so hard. And the other 2 are just unavailable for anything under $500. So again, we're going with what we've got. Let's circle back and talk about what he went to jail for, because 1936 was not the first time that he went to jail. It was just the start of his long-term jail sentence. He was arrested in 1934 for murdering a Union president with a sword after the dock workers had killed a former disciple of Noboru's. So what ended up happening is that Taoka avenged the former disciple by taking out the Union president. He ran away back to his home and he went on the run, but he ended up returning and he faced trial and he was found guilty and he was sentenced to 8 months in prison for murder in 1936. So when he ran away and went home and was on the run, he was on the run for about 2 years. Or he came back earlier than that and he was in court fighting or whatever, but he didn't get the sentence until 1936. And 2 years after murdering this guy and going on the run, he gets 8 months in prison. So it's a pretty sweet deal for him, you know? Pretty much get away with murder. 8 months in prison is absolutely nothing. So he goes into jail in 1936. He gets 8 months. He gets out and he goes right back into the Yakuza. By 1937, he is right in the shit again. In 1937, Taoka goes to a brothel in Kobe. And while he's at this brothel, he ends up getting into a fight and he beats the absolute daylights out of this guy named Masayoshi Onaga. And he beats this boy to a bloody pulp. But he didn't kill him. But he did throw him a beating. Now you would think the fact that he doesn't kill Masayoshi would open up doors, you know, like that's great. He didn't kill him. He could have, but he didn't. But Onaga has a younger brother, and his younger brother is not just going to stand there and let his older brother get beaten to a bloody pulp and not do anything about it. So his younger brother, whose name is Hachiro, he decides that he wants revenge and he's going to avenge his older brother's honor. him being beaten up is just not okay, so he's gonna go to Kazuo Taoka and he's gonna do something about it. Hachiro goes to the headquarters of the Yamaguchi Gumi and he shows up and he has this big sword in his hand and he calls out Kazuo Taoka and he is ready to rumble. He wants a fight. But that's a very big mistake. Taoka comes out with his own sword and he straight up takes this boy's head off. Now, this is his second murder. Remember, he murdered somebody in 1934. He went on the run. He got his jail sentence of 8 months in 1936. This happens in 1937. So he just got out of jail for the first murder. And now he's being arrested again for another murder. This time, the court was not as lenient as they were the first time. And he was given 8 years in prison for this murder. This is his second murder charge that he will be doing jail time for in 2 years. Like, that is so wild. Now, if you think 8 years for 2 murders is ridiculously lenient, get this. He was released from prison after serving only 2 years. Like, at this point, go mob ties, man. Like, this guy, there is no way in hell that this wasn't because of the Yamaguchi Gumi. There is no other explanation. You don't commit 2 murders and serve only 2 years and 8 months in prison. I don't care where in the world you are, that just does not happen. And the same thing happened as last time. The Yamaguchi Gumi were not mad that he did this. If anything, they loved him more for it. And when he got out of jail after his second murder, they welcomed him back with open arms. Now, soon after this happened, he went to jail in 1937. He did 2 years, so he probably got out around 1939. And soon after that, unfortunately, the only father figure that Taoka had ever known in his life, Noboru Yamaguchi, died in 1942. When Noboru died, a new leader was appointed, and the new leader that was appointed was Kazuo Taoka. He was appointed as the new leader of the Yamaguchi Gumi. He didn't get that title until 1946, and he was really young when he got it. He was only 33 years old when he was appointed as the head of the Yamaguchi Gumi. But remember, the Yamaguchi Gumi, the Yakuza as a whole, was not what we know it as now. Like, it was a pretty small-time operation. It wasn't gigantic at all. It wasn't this big, huge corporation that's in magazines as the biggest organized crime syndicate on the planet. It was just a small-time thing. So as much as it's super impressive to be given this honor at such a young age, it's not at the level as it is now. And the reason that it's at the level it is now is because of Kazuo Taoka. Now, keep in mind, there is not a lot of information out there about Kazuo Taoka. And I don't know if maybe there's a lot more information in Japanese and it just hasn't been translated, but I didn't really have access to very many sources here. So I'm definitely going to put the videos and the reading material that I got this information from in the description of my video, because I think that any content creator that puts information out there deserves to be noted when their work is being used. So I'm definitely going to cite the sources that I got this information from in the description of my video. But I got some conflicting reports because I saw that he only got 2 years in jail for the 1937 murder, but then I saw that he got out of jail in 1943, which would be 6 years later. So I don't really understand. It doesn't really seem like that's lining up. I saw in some places that Taoka was still in jail when Noboru died in 1942. I also saw in some places that he got out of jail in 1939. So I don't really know whether he was in jail or not when Noboru died, but I do know that he was in jail until at least 1939. So he's 33 years old. He is now the head of the Yamaguchi Gumi, and we're going to rewind because we're going to talk a little bit about his personal life. Because shortly after he got out of jail, Kazuo Taoka would marry his wife, Fumiko Taoka. Together, the couple would have 2 children, Yuki Taoka, who was born in 1964, and Mitsuru Taoka, who was born in 1943. So let's rewind to before Kazuo Taoka ever goes to jail, and we're going to tell this little love story between Kazuo Taoka, and Fumiko Fukayawa. Again, I know I botched the crap out of that name. I'm so sorry. Fumiko is actually like a really extraordinary figure next to Kazuo. And to be honest, it really would have made a lot of sense and probably would have been more beneficial for me to do this entire episode about Fumiko rather than Kazuo. But alas, I decided on the trajectory that I went on. I stuck with it, so we're going to keep moving. But I do want to stop and talk about Fumiko a decent amount before we move forward. So let's go ahead and do that. Fumiko Taoka was born Fumiko Fukayawa in 1920. She, like Kazuo, grew up in extreme poverty, but she was different in one significant way. She always had a family. She always had her parents. Her parents owned a small coffee shop in Japan, and even though they were poor, they were extremely poor, they were together. They were a family. And that's just not something that Kazuo ever knew or got to benefit from. So that was a huge benefit for her growing up, was that she had a family. Kazuo met Fumiko when he dropped into a coffee shop for some coffee. At the time, Fumiko's mom had become sick, so she took over running the business while her mom was recovering, and she ran it with her dad. Fumiko and Kazuo locked eyes, they fell in love, and it was love at first sight. Like, they just head over heels for each other. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the relationship for one simple reason. Kazuo was already 20 years old when he met Fumiko. So he's already balling. Remember, he started working for them at like 18 years old. He's already got money. He's already a gangster. But let's stop here and let's do a little math, because there's some sick shit going on here. Kazuo Taoka was born in 1913. Fumiko was born in 1920. That means that in 1933, when the two of them met and fell in love at first sight, Fumiko would be 13 years old and Kazuo was 20. This little girl is still in like junior high, maybe high school if she's lucky. And like, ew. I mean, I get it. There's different cultures, different standards, different things are normal. This is back in the day, but still, that is disgusting. Grown-ass men should not be marrying little girls. It may have been normal in history, but still, it just makes me puke a little bit. Like a 13-year-old, when you're 20 years old, what could you possibly see in a 13-year-old? I just don't see it. Especially when you're 20 years old and you're in a gang. You're successful. You're making money. Like, there is no reason for this. But you know what? I can see how it happened from her point. Fumiko is part of a family that's in extreme poverty and they're just struggling to survive. They're trying to make it day to day. She's only ever known a life of poverty. And here before her stands this super powerful mob boss. Even if he's not a boss when they met, he's powerful. He's in a silk suit. He's interested in her, and oh my god, a bad boy. Like, I get it. I get where she's coming from. It should have been him that's like, you're 13 years old and that's gross. But he didn't. He decided, oh, this little girl, this child has a crush on me. So what's the worst that could happen? This is pre-World War II in Japan. So it's a super poor country, but it's an even poorer area. So I can see how she would get on board. She would see the money, she would get excited, and she would like it. And then he shows interest, and you're gonna fall in love, like, immediately. Most 13-year-old girls would. It's on the 20-year-old to not have feelings. Kazuo Taoka was known as, like, the dapper Don of Japan. He dressed really nice. He flexed the fact that he had money. So that can be very, very attractive to a 13-year-old child. I get it. Especially because she's working at this small little coffee shop while her mom is sick. They have a low income. I get it. I get where she was coming from. But the relationship's not just smooth sailing. Her dad vehemently hates gangsters. So he looked down on Kazuo from day one, and he hated that boy. Add that onto the fact that his 13-year-old daughter is already making googly eyes at this 20-something-year-old guy, and it's pretty obvious off the rip that this dad is going to hate this man, and he's never gonna approve. So Kazuo becomes a regular in the coffee shop. He shows up every day. He falls in love with this 13-year-old child, and he starts going to the coffee shop every day. yeah, the dad hates him, but whatever. He gets attention from this little girl and he likes it, so he keeps going back. But before they could take their relationship any further, Kazuo ended up going to jail. So he would disappear. He disappeared and went on the run. Remember, he went back to his hometown and went on the run for 2 years and then would come back and do 8 months in jail. That was after he had already met her. So the whole time he's on the run and the whole time he's in jail, he has one thought. One person that he woke up thinking about, one person he went to bed thinking about, one person he has ambitions to see again and lusted after, and that is now 14, 15-year-old Fumiko. October of 1935 comes around and Kazuo gets out of jail. Fumiko is waiting at the jail cell with open arms, and by 1936, Fumiko is 16 years old, Kazuo is 23 years old, and Kazuo goes to Fumiko's dad and he asks for her hand in marriage. And this is the first time that Fumiko's dad has ever been made aware that there's any kind of relationship at all. He has no idea up until this point. And then all of a sudden, he's got this gangster standing in front of him asking if he can marry his daughter. But remember, Fumiko's dad hates gangsters and he will never give his blessing for this wedding. He will never approve of his daughter marrying a gangster. So, of course, he says no. He's like, hell no. You are not marrying my daughter. I will not give you my blessing. But the face-off between Kazuo and Fumiko's dad pretty much pushes Fumiko right into Kazuo's arms because the dad finds out about this relationship by Kazuo asking for her hand and he kicks her out. He excommunicates her. And I get it. I get where the dad's coming from being angry, okay? Like, he's finding out for the first time that his 16-year-old daughter has just been groomed by this dude that was coming into the coffee shop for 3 years. She's 16, she was 13 when they first started flirting with each other. He's a known gangster. Like, it's very well known that he's in the Yakuza. Now, 3 years later, he wants her hand in marriage. So dad finds out, he kicks Fumiko out of the house, excommunicates her, you no longer have a family. And what is Fumiko supposed to do? She's 16 years old. She's still in school. She can't support herself. And she just lost her job because she's excommunicated from the family. She works at the family coffee shop. So what does that mean? Where does she go? How is she supposed to make it as a 16-year-old girl completely on her own? Obviously, her only option is to run to her much older, rich gangster boyfriend, and she moves in with Taoka right away. Things go from bad to worse pretty quickly because, as we know, Kazuo doesn't just go to jail for those 8 months. He gets out, he gets made, and he's quickly sentenced to 8 years in prison. Now, this poor girl is like 16 to 18 years old, has been disowned by her family, kicked out on the street, went to live with her gangster boyfriend, who's full-fledged Yakuza, and he is now sentenced to 8 years in prison. While he's in jail, she's consistently going and visiting him. And she proved herself to be a ride or die. She said she would wait for him, and she waited out his long jail sentence and promised to be there when he got back, and she was. She kept open communication with the other Yakuza members while he was in jail. One would presume that she did this to, one, pass along any messages from Kazuo to the rest of the gangsters that wouldn't be able to go there and visit him, and two, to get money from them. Like, how is she supporting herself? How is she keeping an apartment? How is she paying the rent, the electric? Like, that's the kind of thing that the Yakuza would probably take care of. It's the same thing as the Mafia. If one of your members is in jail, you take care of the family, especially when you have a 16-year-old girl that's been disowned by her family and is completely dependent on her boyfriend who's now in prison. But I would presume that it was probably a lot more of carrying messages back and forth. So Kazuo gets out of jail. Now, I don't know if it happened when he was in jail or shortly after he got out of jail, but either way, he gets out of jail and soon Noboru dies. And Kazuo takes over leadership of the Yamaguchi Gumi family. And when he does this, he immediately starts growing the gang into an international force. He has a whole lot of ideas for what he wanted for the Yamaguchi Gumi, and as soon as he's given the reins of leadership, he starts instituting that. And the entire way, Fumiko is right by his side. Like, she's helping him, she's advising him, she's listening to him, she's doing everything she needs to do, saying everything she needs to say, and they seem from the outside in to be a perfect couple. After Kazuo took over leadership of the Yamaguchi Gumi family, he was known as the godfather of the Yakuza. But even further than that, Fumiko was known as the godmother of the Yakuza. She would mentor the young boys that came into the Yakuza and was always the maternal role for the incoming young boys that came into the gang. She was always around and taking care of the boys, and if Kazuo took someone on as a protege, Fumiko would be a huge part of their life as well. Now, while Taoka was raised by Yamaguchi, he didn't get his hands on him until he was a lot older, and he lived a very hard life until he got to Yamaguchi, and it showed. He was a scrapper. Like, he was someone that knew how to fight, and he knew what it was like to fight for his next meal. And when somebody's like that, like, you can't tell them anything. At the same time, he watched Yamaguchi commit crimes with impunity. He watched them form a brotherhood, a bond with each other that would have any one of them dying at any moment for each other. And Taoka wanted that more than anything as somebody that came from a very, very, very broken family. One of the huge ways that Taoka was able to make money was through labor unions. He and his gang would go around and they would round up unskilled labor and he would hire them. After that, he would contract the labor out to shipping companies, and anywhere that needed labor, he would contract them out at a discount. So let's go through how that would work. So let's say they hired this guy, Matt. I know that's an American name, but we're going to go with Matt. So they hire Matt and they tell him, we're going to pay you $50 a day and you're going to do general labor. Now, they're paying Matt no matter what. On Monday, Matt goes to work for a company and he makes $100 per day. That $100 per day is paid to the Yamaguchi Gumi, not to Matt. And then the Yamaguchi Gumi would pay the $50 to Matt and they would make the extra $50 and they would keep it. On Tuesday, company B is hiring Matt for $75 a day. And the $75 goes to the Yamaguchi Gumi, $50 of it goes to Matt, and $25 of it goes to the Yamaguchi Gumi. And this was not a foolproof plan. Like, this could end up costing the Yamaguchi Gumi. If they couldn't find him a job one of the days of the week, they're still paying him. Whether he's employed for that day or not, the Yamaguchi Gumi is paying him for that day. Or maybe the company that's hiring the labor is only paying $30 for the day. The Yamaguchi Gumi is still paying Matt that $50 for that day. But at the end of the day, because of the power and influence of the Yamaguchi Gumi and of Kazuo Taoka in particular, I would wager that it was very, very, very rare that a company wouldn't pay the full amount to the employees. So I would wager that they didn't lose out on this transaction very often, but it was worth it for the laborers to work for them, because even though they could be making money at these individual places, maybe a little bit more money than they would for the Yamaguchi Gumi, if they weren't able to find steady work every single day, they would end up losing an entire day's pay, where the Yamaguchi Gumi are able to provide consistent work because of all their connections. So it was a mutually beneficial agreement, relationship, whatever. And this whole setup ended up being one of the most profitable endeavors for this entire gang that existed. Like, that was one of their biggest money earners, because it was so easy to leverage the connections that they already had to fill the voids that the companies needed. A lot of other gangs in the Yakuza would try to pick it up and do the same scheme and hire laborers, but a lot of them dropped out really quick. Most of them were not nearly as successful as the Yamaguchi Gumi, just because they didn't have the connections that Taoka had. They didn't have the connections that the Yamaguchi Gumi had. They weren't able to find consistent work for these laborers on a regular basis, and it would end up costing them. Taoka would eventually gain so much power that if he had been in the American Mafia, he would definitely have been referred to as the Capo di tutti capi, the boss of all bosses. Like, think Joe the Boss Masseria level, like El Chapo, Carlo Gambino, like the most powerful person in an entire gang, not just the Yamaguchi Gumi, the entire Yakuza. That's Kazuo Taoka. The Yakuza was entrusted by the government to do jobs that they weren't really able to do themselves, especially since the police force was pretty much non-existent. And interestingly enough, the Japanese government would give the Yakuza jobs that were very similar to the jobs that the US government would give to the American Mafia. The way that Albert Anastasia was breaking heads at the docks if a strike were to break out, and he was sinking ships when the Germans tried to pull up on our ports, the Yakuza was entrusted with breaking up violent protests and guarding the city in a way that the police force may not have been able to do. The immigrant population continued to boom in Japan, but the immigrants into the country were very hostile. They would come into Japan, and then once they were there, they would cause riots, they would take over buildings. It got to the point that the mayor had to specifically go to Taoka and personally ask him to handle it, and he did. It was easy enough. He just had to bomb the hell out of the crowd that had taken over a government building. And it was easy for him because let's say there's a crowd of 300 people, much less Yakuza had to get together to break up these riots than the amount of people in the riots. You could get 40 people in the Yakuza to take down a 300-person mob, because they're not working together, and the Yakuza are. Plus, I would wager that the immigrants that came and they were waging violent protests and riots weren't as heavily armed as the Yakuza would show up being. And these little acts of service is huge in helping the gang. This would help the gang because, like, when the government needed something done but they couldn't do it themselves, they would turn to the Yakuza. What ends up happening there? Oh, you owe me a favor. And they would just gain a lot more respect. It wasn't the same thing as the way that America thinks about the American mafia. It was more like, these are people that are here to protect us. Like, think like Batman type shit. Like, they worshipped these guys. And they probably still do. Taoka, he soared criminally, but he soared professionally even more. He created the Yamaguchi Gumi construction company, which would end up taking over the entire cargo industry, to the point that Taoka was appointed as the vice chairman of the National Longshoremen's Association. And honestly, I feel like I'm literally telling the same story of Albert Anastasia, who was the president of the Longshoremen Association over here in America. The construction company and their control over the entire cargo industry would net them about $17 million a year. Like, they netted $17 million in 1965, which is a huge number in 1965. And construction wasn't the only jobs that the Yamaguchi Gumi did. Like, they did a lot of other stuff too. They did construction, they did labor unions, yes, and that was a majority of their money. But they also did jobs like providing security, and they would provide security for all industries. I told you earlier about how they were doing security for a movie theater. They did clubs, restaurants, all the way up to pulling security for visiting celebrities that were visiting Japan. And it worked out really well. The gang expanded exponentially and ended up taking over a lot of other Yakuza gangs. By the late 1980s, they controlled over 300 gangs in the Yakuza. So they just went around enveloping everybody and expanding their numbers. Taoka ran the Yakuza the way that Lucky Luciano ran the mob. He didn't just want gangsters, he wanted businesses under his gang. Each of the individual gangs were urged to start their own companies and make their own millions, which was really beneficial for the Yamaguchi Gumi because they would kick up a percentage to the umbrella corporation. The way that Lucky Luciano dragged the American mafia into the 20th century, running it like a company, structuring it like a corporation or a business, so did Taoka. It got to the point where all criminal activity in the entire country of Japan was ran by Taoka and the Yamaguchi Gumi. If there was a rival gang that was making more money than them, no issue. They would just steamroll over the gang and either decimate the entire gang and get rid of it, or they would envelop them into the Yamaguchi Gumi, which would get a percentage of their revenue. So either way, they were getting rid of the gang and taking over the business that they were in and starting to make profits that they had made, or they would just envelop the gang, they would expand their numbers, and they would get a percentage of all their income in the future. And this isn't just a theoretical statement, they did it on multiple occasions. There's a whole lot of gangs that were freestanding, independent gangs that had nothing to do with the Yakuza at all, that would be enveloped by the Yamaguchi Gumi and now under their control and protection. It was just another day at the office for them to envelop an entire gang that had 100 gangsters and welcome them into the fold of the Yamaguchi Gumi. They swallowed up the Honda Kai, the Miyamoto Gumi, and pretty much any other gang that they came across. So, like, those are two occasions that I can find specific mentions. of when they took them over, but this was a regular occurrence. And with each new gang that they enveloped came new earning potential, as well as new territory that they would inherit just from having that gang. Now they have control over the Honda Kai, and whatever territory the Honda Kai has, that now belongs to the Yamaguchi Gumi. And the list of the gangs that they would envelop didn't just stay within the Yakuza. They took control of motorcycle gangs. They took control of peddling gangs, gambling gangs, all gangs at all walks of life, all levels, top, bottom, middle, doesn't matter. They were all subject to be commandeered by the Yamaguchi Gumi. Now, if you're a normal viewer on my channel, you know what the Castellammarese War is. And a Castellammarese War type of battle started to break out in the Yakuza in the early to mid-70s. The way that in the Castellammarese War, the Young Turks faced off against the Mustache Petes, the same thing went on in the Yakuza and in the Yamaguchi Gumi. The younger generation of the Yakuza clashed hard with the older generation, and for exactly the same reason. The Mustache Petes fought as hard as they possibly could to maintain the old world values and the old world morals and the code of conduct and all of that, and the Young Turks wanted to modernize. They wanted to bring the American Mafia into the 20th century. They wanted to work with people outside of their group. They just wanted to get more on par with where the times were, but the Mustache Petes didn't want that. And the same exact thing happened here. The younger generation of the Yakuza came under fire when a lot of the more senior members in the gang thought that the newer organization wasn't really following the moral code that the Yakuza and the Yamaguchi Gumi had been built on. They strayed away from their original mission. They lost the values and the morals that the Yamaguchi Gumi and the Yakuza as a whole had been built upon, and they didn't like that. They weren't obeying their elders, and they took it upon themselves to do whatever they wanted to do, including things they were specifically ordered not to do. And that's a serious problem for these more senior members that never would have thought of doing that when they were younger. In the eyes of the more senior members, the younger members are starting to lose sight of what they had been built for: loyalty, respect, and obedience. Now, eventually, Taoka took on a number 2, and his name was Kenichi Yamamoto. And Yamamoto would be the face of the Yamaguchi Gumi. The entire organization, Yamamoto, was just the one in front of the cameras, the one that everybody thought was the boss. Because remember, this is an entire conglomerate of a corporation. Taoka had 2 murder charges. He wasn't exactly the best person that was fit for the role to be the boss and the leader of this gigantic corporation in the eyes of the public. So Yamamoto was the perfect fit for this. Yamamoto had a pretty clean background, so he would end up going in front of the cameras. When the Yamaguchi Gumi was talked about in the papers, Yamamoto would be mentioned as the leader. Whenever violence got bad, Yamamoto would hold press conferences and he would apologize to the public. He was a trusted member of society. So a lot of the public would just let this slide. They didn't look at it like, oh, this criminal is over here doing bad things. They looked at it like, well, we know Yamamoto. He's a respectable guy. He has respect for everybody. He's not dirty. He's not a criminal. It's okay. We'll let that slide. It's okay. It's not that bad. So a few people died. So a few innocent civilians got caught in the crosshairs of this war. That's okay because we trust Yamamoto. But in this Castellammarese War type of battle that started to break out in the 70s, a lot of stuff had to be addressed publicly because there's civilians getting caught in the crosshair. This is a violent war. People are dying on the streets. So Yamamoto would have to go in front of the cameras and say, like, I'm so sorry that 3 people on their way to work just lost their lives, and I'm sorry that that happened. But as much as they put Yamamoto as the face of the corporation, Taoka was well known as being the leader of the criminal syndicate of the Yamaguchi Gumi. Everybody knew it was Taoka. But there was a way that the public was able to kind of separate the Yamaguchi Gumi construction company from the Yamaguchi Gumi gamblers. And because of that, public opinion of Taoka, as well as the Yakuza as a whole, started to really shift people started to really hate the Yakuza, hate the Yamaguchi Gumi, and hate everybody in it once innocent civilians started losing their lives and being caught up in these shootouts and violent clashes between the warring factions. And then Yamamoto would have to get in front of the cameras and apologize for everything that happens. And because of Yamamoto, the Yamaguchi Gumi would be forgiven. But after a while, after it kept happening and kept happening, the public soon wanted Taoka's head on a platter. Like, they did not like this man. They wanted him dead, or at least for him to be sitting in a jail cell. A huge peace agreement was brokered in 1972 after fighting had gone down between the Yamaguchi Gumi and the Ingawa Kai. Tensions were high. They were in a full-blown war. But after the tensions died down, Taoka personally held a Sakazuki ceremony. And he held it at his home, and the whole point of it was to quash all of this beef that had gone on, and they wanted to form an alliance between the two gangs because these are two of the biggest gangs in the entire Yakuza. Like, these two are giants. So having an alliance between these two gangs would be hugely beneficial, so the least he could do is hold the Sakazuki ceremony. At this Sakazuki ceremony, they swore a blood oath of brotherhood that would bond these two massive corporations together, and between these two organizations, they claimed all but 4 provinces, or prefectures as they're called in Japan, as collectively under their control, which is pretty insane if you think about it. That means that all but 4 areas of Japan were under the control of these two gangs. That just gives you an idea of the scope of this gang. Like, this was gigantic. In July of 1978, Taoka is hanging out at the Belle Ami nightclub in Kyoto. There's a limbo dance exhibition going on. They're all having fun. They're all hanging out. This is an ordinary night. Like, the Yakuza, they go out to clubs every single night. There's nothing crazy about this. But all of a sudden, he feels a huge impact on his back. It turns out Taoka had been shot in the back of the neck by a Matsuda gang member named Kiyoshi Narumi. Narumi had just walked up to his table and started shooting at Taoka past his 5 bodyguards with a .38 pistol. 5 bodyguards this man has around him, and Narumi's able to actually make contact with him. The Matsuda Syndicate was another powerful gang in the area, and it was one of very few gangs that wasn't under the control of the Yamaguchi Gumi or any of the umbrellas that the Yamaguchi Gumi had belonged to. So they clashed, and they clashed hard, and they clashed often. And it all came to a head one night when Taoka caught that bullet to the back of the neck. And amazingly, he lived through this. The guy that shot him was not so lucky. They found his mutilated remains in the woods of the mountains a few weeks later after Taoka had been shot. Even though he lived through this, it started a downward spiral in terms of his health, and his health started to just get worse and worse and worse. And I hate to say it, but this is kind of a case of karma for Taoka. As cool as I think he is, like, I really respect Taoka. He seems like he was a great gang boss. But it doesn't escape me exactly what happened here, so let's talk about it. So why was Taoka attacked? Why is this gang leader, who is seemingly loved, adored, and followed by a majority of the Japanese population, suddenly at risk for being randomly attacked in a nightclub during a goddamn limbo performance? Like, this is so random. This is not at all anything that he would have expected. Well, Narumi had a grievance with the Yamaguchi Gumi. Again, Narumi is a member of the Matsuda Syndicate. Well, it turns out that recently, the Yamaguchi Gumi had gone to war with the Matsuda gang, and their leader had been killed. This was never a beef with Taoka at all. This was an oath of vengeance by followers of an Oyabun that was beloved. Narumi was one of the gangsters in a group that had held a ceremony where they ate the ashes of the leader of the Matsuda gang, the one that had been killed by the war with the Yamaguchi Gumi. They ate the ashes and they swore that they would exact revenge and get vengeance for this beloved Oyabun that had been killed, and obviously they did. Now, while Narumi would definitely feel the brunt of this, like Taoka caught a bullet, but he didn't die, Narumi did. So he felt the brunt of all of this. I don't think that it matters that much to him. It's pretty clear that he was tortured. Like, They found his remains. This did not go fast. It took a few weeks for them to find him for a reason. But he did get the revenge that he and his brothers had set out to get. And I think that's really all that mattered to him. But why would that be karma? Well, let's go back to the beginning. Back before Taoka had taken over as the Oyabun. We're rewinding 35 years back to 1934. We already went over this in part 1. So do you remember where I talked about Taoka's first time in jail, where he did 8 months for killing a union president? At the time, it was a little confusing. Like, why would you kill the leader of the union just because some dock workers that worked for him had killed a fellow protege of Noboru? It just doesn't make sense. There was no personal beef with this union president. He did nothing to you. Why would you kill him for vengeance? Because in order to kill the snake, you cut off the head. Even though at the time, the union leader had absolutely nothing to do with the death of the person that he was killed on behalf of, he was attacked because he was the leader of the union that represented the dock workers that killed Noboru's protege. Sound familiar? Taoka probably had absolutely nothing to do with taking out the leader of the Matsuda Syndicate. Did he give the okay? Maybe. Honestly, probably not. If you think about the numbers at this time, I just told you that all but 4 prefectures in Japan were controlled by the Yamaguchi Gumi and their alliance. It's extremely likely that not every single death, every single beef going on the streets even makes it to Taoka, no less gets okayed by him. He's got over 500 gangs under his belt. Do you really think that he's single-handedly approving every single street beef that's going on? Every single murder on the Yamaguchi Gumi's behalf? Most likely no. But Taoka is the head of the snake. The same way that he killed the union leader to avenge his friend's death, Narumi avenged his friend's death by taking off the head of the Yamaguchi Gumi syndicate. And again, he may not have been successful. Taoka did not die, but the same tactics that he had used against other people were now being used against him. And again, Narumi definitely paid more for his vengeance than Taoka did. When Taoka killed the union president, he only got 8 months in jail. He didn't miss a beat. 8 months in jail is absolutely nothing for premeditated murder. Narumi paid for his crime with his life. But at the end of the day, I guess Taoka did end up paying the price, because in July of 1981, 3 years after the shooting, after this downward spiral of his health, Taoka had a heart attack and he did not make it. And it's thought that his health went on a downward spiral after being shot in the neck, and this massive fatal heart attack was just a culmination of all the health issues that came from being shot that time. By the time Taoka died, the gang had a total of over 500 gangs under their umbrella, with over 2,500 businesses, 40,000 members, and a reach that spans all of Japan. Taoka had built the Yamaguchi Gumi and the Yakuza as a whole into an almighty presence that still runs on the ideals and business plans that he put in place nearly 30 years before his death and during his time as the boss of this conglomerate syndicate. The funeral for Kazuo Taoka was massive. By the time he died, the Yamaguchi Gumi was a multi-billion-dollar network. They had businesses and companies in the construction industry, healthcare, gambling, gaming, adult industries. They ruled the entire black market. This is literally the most multifaceted corporation that exists. The funeral had Yakuza members from over 200 gangs and leaders from the most prominent Yakuza gangs in the entire country. Celebrities that owed all of their success to Taoka came and showed up to pay their respects. There was 800 riot police and 1,300 police officers there to watch over this funeral and make sure nothing went wrong. People were frisked and had to go through multiple rounds of security before they could even enter the funeral. Now, unsurprisingly, when Taoka died, he left his second in command in control. He wanted Yamamoto to be put into the position of power after his death. That didn't work out for very long, though. Kenichi Yamamoto, the one that was doing press conferences and apologizing for the violence that the gang brought to the streets, took over as the boss of the syndicate. It just so happened, though, that when Taoka died, Yamamoto was in prison. He had been arrested a while back for extortion, and he wouldn't get out to take control of the syndicate until the following year. Now, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, a year is not really that long. I'm sure the gang had absolutely no issue with him being in jail for a year and then getting out and running the syndicate. It wouldn't have been a big deal at all for them to just hold down the fort until he got out of jail. But he died only 7 months after Taoka died. And his death is obviously going to spark a massive war because people are going to be vying for control of the gang. The only reason it didn't break out after Taoka died was because he had a successor in place. But once that successor was dead and there was no clear-cut answer as to who would lead the gang, all mayhem breaks loose. When the war broke out, arrests were everywhere. In the months after Taoka's death, 900 Yakuza members were arrested, and 102 guns, 192 swords, and 2 pounds of amphetamines were seized in all of this chaos. The war that broke out took over 20 lives between the gangsters and the civilians combined. In the fallout, Taoka's wife, now 62-year-old Fumiko Taoka, she took control of the gang, and she was the first woman ever to do so. Which, may I say, kudos. This is why I say it would have been very easy for me to make an entire episode about Fumiko. It just so happened that I had already started on Taoka, so it was easier to just keep going with him. But this girl is such a boss. The first woman to ever take control of a Yakuza gang, and it's the biggest Yakuza gang. It's the Yamaguchi Gumi. Like, they are the Yakuza. So Fumiko is a boss. But as much as she had control, the war still waged on who would actually take control of the family. She kind of stepped in as like a de facto, don't go to war, don't keep killing each other, I'll just take control of the family. But they all knew that some man would have to step into this role, so the war just continued. They put people in place as the boss, people died. There was just a succession of leaders and death after this. And after all of this struggle, a group of about 13,000 gangsters, almost half of the Yamaguchi Gumi, would end up splitting off, and they would create the Ichiwa-kai syndicate. And that group would go on to become one of the top 3 syndicates in Japan. And obviously now, the Ichiwa-kai, they're going to be at war with the Yamaguchi Gumi. But the Yamaguchi Gumi, they've been at this way longer, and they know how to handle this. Anybody that had left was offered amnesty and a nice check to return, and a lot of people did end up coming back to the Yamaguchi Gumi. Fumiko soon handed over power to Masahisa Takanaka, and Takanaka taking over control of the family is what led to the Ichiwa-kai breaking off and starting their own gang. They did not like Takanaka. They had a specific person that they wanted to take control of the gang, and because their person didn't get it, they all left. And if their person had gotten it, the other people would have left. This was a no-win situation. Fumiko died of liver failure in January of 1986 while this war is just still waging. And that's what led to the Ichiwa-kai breaking away. They didn't like Masahisa Takanaka. They wanted Hiroshi Yamamoto to be the new gang leader. And if either one of them would have won, there would have been a huge group that was going to break away because it was literally split in half. Half of the Yamaguchi Gumi wanted Masahisa Takanaka, half of them wanted Hiroshi Yamamoto, and it just put a huge fracture in the middle of the group. On January 26th, 1985, Hiroshi Yamamoto sent a group of assassins to take out the current leader, Takanaka. He and 2 of his generals were killed by these hitmen as he was leaving his Gumar's apartment. And this was the breaking point. The Yamaguchi Gumi was over it. Not only did they turn around and say, all right, one last time, anybody that wants to leave the Ichiwa-kai and come back to the parent organization, you're free to do so. We'll give you a check. We'll give you amnesty. Come back over. This is your last chance. Anybody that was left was fair game. They went all out, and violence just rapidly increased across the entire country. There was over 200 gunfights on the streets of Japan, leading to a whole bunch of civilians that got hurt and killed. And this is a big no-no in the Yakuza. This is a super high-profile war. The newspapers every single day would post about it, and they would publish death tolls on either side, the Yamaguchi Gumi side and the Ichiwakai side. Everybody in the public was eating it up, but they were also scared to be in the public. They didn't want to get caught in the crosshairs of one of these gunfights. The Yamaguchi Gumi ended up coming out on top, and of course they did. Like, you don't run away from your parents and expect to be successful. The Yamaguchi Gumi were the OGs. And it was literally like a bratty teenager running away, the Ichiwakai. But this was not a good thing. This was the downfall of the Yamaguchi Gumi right here. The Ichiwakai was down to a few hundred by the end of the 1980s, and by the time the 90s hit, the entire gang collapsed in on itself, and they don't exist anymore. Now, as much as it sucked for the Ichiwakai, it sucked for the Yamaguchi Gumi as well. They didn't walk away unscathed. They lost a huge amount of gangsters in these wars. They also had the entire public opinion about them shift. If you thought it was bad when the wars were going on when Taoka was alive, that was nothing compared to what was happening in this war. You gotta think, 13,000 versus 13,000 gangsters going to war on the streets of Japan. Civilians are not gonna be happy about this. The general public of Japan started viewing these guys as delinquent thugs. And now negative opinion is horrible for any gang, but especially in the Yakuza, where simply being in a syndicate isn't illegal. It's not a crime. Like, in America, you can get charges just for belonging to the mafia. Just for being in the mafia, you can catch charges. That's not how it is in the Yakuza. In Japan, at that time, it was fine to be a member of the Yakuza. It was encouraged even. But once you have the public opinion against you, what happens? First of all, the public stops hiring you to do jobs. They stop hiring your labor. They stop hiring you to do security jobs. Nobody trusts you and nobody wants to pay you. It also makes it a whole lot easier for police to arrest you. You know how we talked about in part 1 about the guys that went and killed the politician and civilians were chopping off their fingers and sending it to the government on their behalf? Nobody is chopping off pinkies and sending the government their fingers on behalf of these Yakuza members that they're now viewing as these, like, street thugs. They don't respect them anymore. These aren't folk heroes. And when one of them are arrested, or a ton of them are arrested, it's just swept under the rug because that's what happens to dirty, dirty gangsters who do criminal activity. And the last and probably the worst consequence of negative public opinion is that you're going to have a huge fall in recruitment. If the public hates you, you want to guess how many men are going to be lining up down the streets to join your organization? Very few. And that's a serious issue when they just lost the amount of gangsters that they lost in this war with the Ichiwakai. I'm pretty sure the Yamaguchi Gumi never recovered from the heights that they were at when Taoka was leading it, and that's because of this war. And there's a few wars since then, but we're not going there. And that's where it stands. I really hope you guys loved the episode. As much as I love exploring the American Mafia, I definitely recognize that it's a super niche market, and there's a very small following about it. Not very many people are super interested in it. I always try to stray away from that very specific, very small genre, and I try to get into other gangs and other crime. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Even if you're a super fan of the Mafia, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Yakuza, and I would assume that a huge chunk of my followers are mega fans of the Mafia, so I hope that this was at least tolerable. I already have my next few episodes picked out, but if you guys have anybody interesting that you'd like me to look into, definitely feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, I do want to let you guys know that I'm going to be trying to pivot my content a little bit in the future. I'm usually focusing on the Mafia, and if I'm not focusing on the Mafia, I'm focusing on other criminal organizations in other areas. But in videos like today's, I tried to branch out and look at gangsters from all over the world. That's like my little true crime niche that I've fit pretty nicely into, but the problem is I've been having a lot of trouble with my growth using this method. So we're gonna see what happens. For the next few episodes, I'm gonna be branching out into different kinds of true crime. And next week's video is something that has already been covered to death. A lot of people have covered this, but I just wanna take a crack at it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this new content and you enjoy the direction that I'm trying to take this. I'm just trying to open up my viewership. My following is is decent. I love every single one of my followers, but it's still pretty small, and I would really like to expand and get some more people in here. So I really, really hope that the people that are diehard Mafia fans will come along on this journey, because I'm not saying I'll never do another Mafia member again. I definitely will. But I'm just trying to expand as well. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye.